Hello, my name is James, and today I will be going through this presentation talking about a brief study of how mass surveillance affects our privacy and freedom of speech. We'll be going through these topics here. So first of all, the introduction to mass surveillance. What's the issue with surveillance? The effect it has on privacy, freedom of speech, and I'll also be including a case study about Edward Snowden and the NSA in the US, a summary of points, and a conclusion as well. Before, we will be talking about privacy and freedom of speech, the impact it has on the citizens and authorities, making sure that we highlight the blurred lines between right and wrong, how it can be ethical, legal, when is it correct to be using surveillance, most importantly, and conveying the findings, methods, and forming a conclusion based on the research that I had made in my assignment. Mass surveillance has been on the rise for decades in many societies all over the world, for example China and North Korea, and in these countries authorities do tend to take advantage of citizens using the technology. As we know, surveillance is not just a simple right or wrong, so it's paramount that we understand how it can be harmful towards individuals or groups of people that are currently under surveillance. Used several research methods. I was ensuring that I was using secondary research, using credible websites, and also included a literature survey. Taking into consideration both legal and ethical issues that are currently arising and have arisen in the past within surveillance. Looking at both sides of the arguments, both from the citizen's point of view and the authority's point of view, how it could be benefiting authorities and citizens or how it could be detrimental to people's human rights, invading privacy, for example. Secondary research was used, such as websites, articles, ensuring that the information that I had acquired was credible and up to date. Now, what is the issue with surveillance? First of all, what is surveillance? So surveillance can mean online or physical. I'm sure you've all seen CCTV cameras strung up on the side of buildings or around town everywhere. This is a form of surveillance, or this could be online with AI bots used in social media sites, just on regular websites to monitor people's behavior. Physical surveillance could also include the mass interception of communications that are held by telecoms operators and many other companies, including mass hacking, indiscriminate use of facial recognition, and many more. Surveillance, as mentioned before, is never just a simple right or wrong. There are many legal and ethical issues that also come along with the use of surveillance. It's used by authorities, intelligence agencies, businesses, and more. And so, again, as mentioned before, it's important that we understand how and when should surveillance be used in these circumstances. It can be difficult to break down surveillance into simple positives and negatives, as there are many blurred lines between whether it is actually benefiting society or if it's a negative. But here we have some of the more clear positives and negatives. Surveillance can help prevent crime, terrorism, and cybercrime. It can be life-saving in some cases, identifying crimes in advance or terrorist attacks. A surveillance state could make for a quote-unquote safer place to live in. Knowing that you're being watched over by authorities, for some people, may be a benefit. Walking home one late at night, you may feel unsafe but knowing that you're under surveillance by authorities could make you feel safer. It also helps aid special operations in foreign countries, spies where they need intel on whoever it is that they're performing their special operations on. Identifying and evaluating emerging patterns of disease. I managed to get this information from the World Health Organization. And now on to the negatives. So, the disregard for the individual. No matter who you are, the acquisition of data will always be connected. So you are always being watched, whether you are suspect of wrongdoing or not. And one of the more sinister ideologies behind surveillance is the idea of guilty until proven innocent. So I'm sure you've all heard the idea of you're always innocent until proven guilty. Well, with surveillance, it's practically the opposite. As I just said, it's guilty until proven innocent. If you're not wanting to share your data with authorities, then they most likely take the view of, well, why are you not wanting to share your data with us? Are you trying to hide something? Are you actually a criminal? Or, they could jump to conclusions. It can be very pervasive in many ways, invading people's privacy, their private lives, which they may not want anybody else to see. Tears down people's rights to privacy, as I said. Surveillance via social media sites is being vastly used all over the world in states. And so the main goals of surveillance are often to gather intelligence, prevent crime, protect national security, or assist the public healthcare systems. However, it may also be used in for other purposes, such as monitoring employee productivity within businesses or tracking customer behavior on websites. For example, Facebook uses their own AI bots to identify trends in your search or what you like or save or who you text or who you view, basically everything you do on Facebook. And based on that information that you have given them, they then post things onto your feed that they think that you will be interested in. So that's just an example of how, although this is online surveillance, this is an example of how a business may use surveillance in order to benefit them. And here we have a bit of a deeper look into how social media surveillance could be affecting people's rights. As you see here, we have an image where it says that social media surveillance violates privacy, enables discrimination between people, threatens migrants' rights, of course restricts freedom of expression. If people know that they're constantly being watched over, it may suppress the way that they want to express themselves, discourages freedom of association, being less likely to join organizations or groups of people due to negative thoughts, or if you know that these people have a bad reputation, they may be being watched and you may not want to go and join them. Disrupting freedom of assembly. Authorities can disrupt non-violent demonstrations and track the names of individuals in attendance as well. And most importantly, it undermines due process. As I mentioned in the slide before, where you are guilty until proven innocent. So you are always being surveyed no matter who you are, whether you are completely innocent or whether you are a criminal. You are being surveyed nonetheless. Surveillance can also be in breach of human rights, such as privacy and freedom of speech. Both of these are very basic human rights, where privacy is fundamental, allowing people to control their own personal information and decide who has access to it and how. But when governments or other organizations are conducting mass surveillance upon individuals, they are effectively collecting their personal information without their consent. And this is a clear violation of someone's individual right to privacy. And once again, guilty until proven innocent. And this could lead to erosion of civil liberties and the suppression of free speech, which leads us on to our next point, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is also a key basic human right, allowing those who wish to express themselves however they like. Surveillance, on the other hand, can vastly oppose this basic human right. Being suppressed for expressing yourself, always being under surveillance, knowing that how or what you might say online could have a very big backlash on yourself, may in turn have a big effect on how people decide to express themselves, whether that be online or physically. Upon this information, detail profiles and monitor individuals' behavior. So companies are able to then, as I said, create detailed profiles upon people who express themselves, and then identify them as either people who have done wrongdoing, and in turn, so speaking, you could almost end up being a criminal for basically just expressing how you feel. Furthermore, restricting an individual's ability to freely express their opinions, and overall surveillance can undermine freedom of speech by creating an environment of fear and intimidation. And I managed to get that from the Guardian. Now onto the case study. Since the terrorist attacks of 9/11, mass surveillance in the USA and other countries has vastly increased. The United States National Security Agency, otherwise known as the NSA, funds research to develop ways of harvesting information shared in online social networks. Within the NSA, a system was developed by Edward Snowden, who was an employee of the NSA, allowing the company to spy on their own citizens. When developing this system, Edward Snowden was actually misinformed as to how this system was going to be used. He was told it would be used only in emergencies if all other systems were down and nothing was able to be used. However, the NSA were using this to spy on their own citizens in the US, and upon finding out this information, Edward Snowden was very concerned and thought it was very ethically incorrect, and had so many legal issues. And so he then exposed the NSA for espionage, releasing classified documents and files to a group of journalists from The Guardian. Snowden's actions then sparked a very big controversial debate about the balance between national security and individual privacy, and how surveillance should be used and when it can be used. He was subsequently charged with violating the Espionage Act and other laws in the US. He then fled to the United States and has been living in exile in Russia since 2013. Now, many people consider Snowden a hero for what he did, for exposing the NSA and the surveillance programs that they were using, and just raising general awareness about the potential dangers mass surveillance could have, whilst other people view him as a traitor who compromised their national security. This was also from The Guardian. And finally, we have our conclusion. So I think it's evident to suggest that the controversy surrounding surveillance is very much ongoing and will continue into the future. Using the research that was made, we can see that there are some clear positives and negatives, but however, some of these points may be biased. So an individual's right to privacy may be completely broken down by being constantly under surveillance online or physically using cameras, but then surveillance can also help prevent terrorist attacks, crime, potentially saving several, or if not hundreds of lives. Surveillance can have a negative impact on individuals' privacy and civil liberties, but then again, it's useful for protecting national security, preventing crime, as I've mentioned, but it must be used reasonably and with some oversight to prevent the violation of people's rights. As we saw in the US with the NSA, they were abusing their power to spy on individuals when it was unnecessary and unethical. And so it's important for individuals to have control over their personal information and the ability to challenge their decisions based on surveillance data. There must be a balance between benefits of surveillance and the potential harm it could cause to citizens. I think that is one of the most important things that we need to take away from this presentation, to understand how potentially dangerous surveillance could be, and also, on the other hand, how it could potentially vastly benefit the citizens of a state and the wider community as well. And this is my reference slide where I got all my information from that was used throughout this presentation. And finally, thank you very much for listening, guys. My name is James Slater, and that was my presentation about how mass surveillance affects privacy and freedom of speech.